At the age of 32, I was very happy with my life. Lived in a small town with and engaged to a pretty 29-year-old girl with whom I had a 5-year-old son. Nice house in a nice neighborhood, successful business in my own bricklaying company with 4 employees. Julia and I had been living together for 6 years and were starting to talk about a big wedding. We were in no hurry to get married. Most young people prefer to do as we did, live together for a few years before they can afford an expensive marriage. This story began on Friday afternoon when I went to a nearby train station to pick up Julia, who had been gone for almost a week for a refresher course in political PR after my son and I had put her on the train the previous Sunday night. Julia is expected to be the future girl in our small town's local politics, and I've heard that her local party expects her to take up one of the leadership positions in their party in the future. She is a member of a small liberal party that sits between the right and left blocks, holding the balance and benefiting from both sides. A few times a year, she went away for various political courses, usually only for a day or two. Like a good mother, she missed her child when she was away and called home every day to chat with him. But this time was different, and already on Tuesday night, when our boy was sick, I had a strange feeling that something was wrong. She didn't call or even answer when I tried to call her cell phone all evening. At home, she didn't call even after several text and voice messages. No communication until I contacted her through course administration on Wednesday morning, and she was mad as a bee because I contacted her through course administrators when she next called me on Thursday. Now, at the train station, I knew immediately that something was wrong. Of course, she was excited to see our baby, but when I tried to kiss and hug her, she wouldn't let me. "Not here," was her odd comment. I think that's what they usually do at train stations when people meet or break up. We drove home in silence, and she was silent even at home until our boy went to bed and fell asleep. I made a romantic homecoming dinner, but she said she had already eaten and didn't want anything. Now I was worried about her and asked, "I can see that something is bothering you. Are you sick? Or do you have other problems?" "No, I'm not sick, but I need to tell you something very important." "Tell me." "I met the man in my life, and I love him with all my heart. I am his now, only his woman. You can remain my friend, but you are no longer my man." "Are you sure?" "Yes." "And you slept with him?" "We didn't sleep together. We made love, which is much more sensitive than simple sex, and of course we did it every night." "Who is he?" "His name is Benjamin Hassel. He holds a senior position in the district council of our party. Unfortunately for me, he is still married and lives in our district capital. He hasn't decided what to do with his marriage yet, but one thing I know for sure is that I love him with all my heart." I learned 2 important things about difficult situations. First, don't panic. And second, calm down before doing anything. After a moment's silence, I asked her, "When are you leaving me and where are you going? What about our son?" "I'm not leaving you, at least not yet. He's married and we need time to figure out how all 3 of us can handle this situation." "I'm not leaving? How can you think for 1 second that you can stay here if you're sleeping with someone else? Are you completely out of your mind, or has your lover drugged you? You must be out of your mind if you think I want to keep a whore in my house." "Like I said, we can stay friends. I've never been more serious than I am right now. Please let me show you a fair proposal for our new lifestyle." I decided to stay calm and listen to everything she had to say before I did anything. She dug through her bag, took out her laptop, and went to my home office, from where I heard the sound of a printer. She came back with a paper filled with text, which she held out to me. It was something like a contract, but before I started reading it, she told me, "Benjamin wanted a lot more rules, but I did my best to bargain fair terms for you. Ben said that if you wanted to change anything in this contract, he promised to agree to further negotiations between him and you. But I must warn you, he's a very smart man, so you may end up with a worse deal than the one I managed to negotiate for you. I really did my best to offer you fair terms." I realized that this Benjamin must have some strange powers if he had managed to drive Julia to such a complete frenzy in a week. If I agreed to their terms, I would turn into a real cuckold, so I asked her, "Do you really want to treat me the way the whore wife and her jailbird lover treated poor Sebastian? Do you? And I hope you know what happened next?" Sebastian's wife made a fool of him for the whole town when she left for a bachelorette party and came home with a newly paroled parolee. Poor Sebastian was pushed out of bed and into the bedroom where the jailer screwed his wife several times until the wee hours of the morning. Poor Sebastian dared not object when a much stronger man demanded that he put on a napkin, become a butler for them, and serve them drinks and breakfast on the marital bed. Afterward, the jailer bragged to the whole town about what he had done. Everyone sympathized with poor Sebastian. When the ex-prisoner promised to do it again and take pictures next time, Sebastian's co-workers got fed up. Together, they all shook the shit out of the jailer, who after a week in the hospital had left town in search of a healthier environment elsewhere. Julia looked a little confused with a startled expression on her face when I mentioned Sebastian, but apparently she'd been brainwashed so badly that she wasn't about to stop her crazy suggestions. She tried to cheer me up by saying, "No, of course not. This will be a private matter between you, me, and Ben. No one will ever know about our relationship. When Ben isn't visiting me, it will be business as usual, except that you'll sleep in the spare room and we won't have sex like we used to. But as you can see from the paper, you agree to be faithful to me, and so Ben has promised to let me give you good sex to keep you satisfied and happy. He suggested that he usually goes home after making love to me, so you shouldn't be too jealous of him. Of course, this is a kind reward that I will only give you if you behave well. And as you can see from the last paragraph, if Ben doesn't file for divorce and leave his wife within 6 months, I'll take you back and everything will be as it was before you met Ben." She offered sloppy seconds as a gracious reward for me. I'd heard enough and couldn't take any more of the nonsense she was telling me. I couldn't believe she was being serious and thought it was impossible for a normal spouse to go so nuts in 5 days in a political PR course. It must be some dirty joke invented by the merry party gang. So I burst into laughter and exclaimed, "Great joke! Is that some kind of candid camera? Or do you have a tape recorder in your bag and you're going to use it for entertainment at some party? Great joke, really." Because I was beginning to think you'd lost your mind and were seriously thinking about some stupid Ben and his mumbo-jumbo papers. Instead of reading, I crumpled their contract into a ball and laughingly tossed it to her. To my great surprise, she didn't burst out laughing or even smile. She just looked me straight in the eye and said, now with a more frightened expression on her face, "Please understand. I'm serious." "What the hell do you mean?" "Please calm down and let me finish." Now I couldn't take it anymore and started yelling what I had to say. "Please shut up and listen to me for a while. You and your crazy boyfriend must have been heavily drugged and lost all common sense when you started this shit. My dear lady, you forget that you live on my private property, and you should know that you and that crazy guy you met on your fucking courses can't tell me anything about what I should do or not do on my own property. But I have the unfettered right to ask you to be nice and leave my house as soon as possible, taking all your belongings with you. As far as I know, you have spent the bulk of your wages in buying clothes, so you have nothing else to take with you. I want you out of my house as soon as possible. I am as crazy as you are, so I realize that it will take you some time to find an apartment that you can afford, so I can let you rent a spare room as a lodger for a while. Tomorrow, I will tell you what is included in the terms of the lease and give you a contract to sign. You can accept my terms or you can leave right away. One of the terms is no guests. If I see the goddamn psycho responsible for this mess in my house, he will be thrown out immediately. Do you understand what I've told you?" She began to cry as she realized that she had failed to do any of the things she had promised Ben. Everything she and Ben had planned for their future in my house was now completely unrealistic and non-negotiable. "You can't do this to me, you can't," she sobbed. "I've already done it. You admitted you cheated on me with some crazy Benjamin and there's nothing more I can do. Your boyfriend must have completely brainwashed you. How could you think for 1 second that I'm as weak as poor Sebastian? What the hell were you doing in that damn course? Please take off your wedding ring." She didn't say anything back, just sat at the kitchen table. I went to our bedroom and took all her stuff to the spare bedroom in the basement. The spare room is almost like a small apartment with its own bathroom. The large space outside of it has a couch and a small TV, so she had nothing to complain about. I then went to my home office and wrote up a tenancy agreement. She had the right to use the kitchen, half of the refrigerator, and the laundry room. We both had to have our own food and we had to cook our own meals. She had no right to use the living room, no car, no computer, no printer, no fax machine, no phone. She was a tenant, nothing more, and had to pay a week's rent in advance. However, even in my anger, I felt a little sorry for her, so I set a fairly low rent. When everything was ready, I went to the dining room and began my lonely meal. As I ate, I reflected on what had happened during the evening. One thing was certain. Julia must have been completely brainwashed by the madman she had met on the course. He must have made her dream of a top-level political job where I didn't fit in as her spouse. I couldn't find any other reasonable explanation for her new craziness. Of course, sometimes she was jealous of Jennifer, one of her divorced friends who had a new boyfriend several times a year. She was angry at my comments that Jennifer's behavior was just a desperate search for someone like me to settle down with, not a sign of new happiness. Neither of us could deny that after 6 years together and the birth of a child, we no longer felt the passion we had when we met. It was no secret what could and usually did happen at courses and conferences, but as long as no more than 20 to 30% were required to attend such events, spouses at home usually always accepted the explanation that she or he who was there was, of course, one of the innocent 70 to 80%, which was indeed true most of the time. If Julia had used common sense when she fell in love with that creep Ben and wanted to keep our relationship with me intact until his divorce, she could have spent many nights with him in some hotel telling me she was away on some political course. I never checked to see if she was where she said she was, and never even thought of questioning her about what she was doing when she left for the course. Her words were always enough for me. But apparently Ben was too stingy to pay for such pleasures, and decided it would be free and with less risk of being caught if they used my house and had some sort of threesome with me as the cuckolded slacker. If they, or even one of them, had common sense, they should have realized that this kind of shit is too much for the average man to accept without a fight. I know that this kind of threesome with a raghead husband is common in erotic stories, but the main difference between fiction and fact is that the husband in those stories never fights back or defends himself against the intruder who is about to take control of his wife and make a mess of his life. In reality, every normal man would rather take the fight than be enslaved by a weakling. When such a threesome occurs in real life, all participants usually share an interest in participating in the game and find each other through ads in sex magazines, in swinger clubs, or simply by hiring a prostitute to fulfill one of the roles. To do what Ben had brainwashed Julia to do was doomed. First, tell me about her cheating, and then try to tell me that Ben and her had decided what I was allowed to do in my own home. The next morning, Julia accepted my terms and paid for the week, but made a fuss about the boy and threatened to keep him away from me. I didn't care because it wasn't her place to decide such matters. I was sure that I would be able to get a fair judgment about him. I promised her that we could share the food we still had at home, and as we were having breakfast on Saturday morning, the phone rang. I answered it, and a male voice unfamiliar to me said, "Good morning. Am I speaking to Lars Eriksson?" "Yes." "My name is Ben Hassel. Did Julia speak to you last night?" "Yes." "May I ask, have you come to an agreement?" "Yes, we came to an agreement, but not what you bloody asshole is thinking. She signed a lease, and it will be my pleasure to kick her out of my house when she finds somewhere else to go. Please remember that if I find your goddamn ass on my property, rest assured I will pounce on you without warning." Oh my God, can I talk to her? "Yeah, sure, but not on my phone." "Then can you tell me her cell phone number?" "Don't ask me, asshole." I think I threw him off a bit, because it was hard to believe that any of his classmates or co-workers would dare to call him an asshole, even though almost all of them had wanted to do it more than once. A few seconds later, the phone rang again, and Ben shouted, "I demand to speak to Julia." "You what?" "I have a right to talk to her." "Fuck off, asshole. One more call from you and you can read about your disgusting cheating ways and sexual escapades in the evening tabloids." A strange expression appeared on Julia's face. She knew that no politician would dare treat her lover and guru Ben like pure shit and talk to him the way I did. I always treated her well and many times agreed with her suggestions instead of arguing with her. If she thought I was doing it because I was weak, she had to realize now that she was wrong. Then I told her what she already knew. That was the so-called man in your life. How can you be so rude to people you've never met? Guess how rude I'll be when I get close to this asshole. In the evening, we were invited and promised 2 more weeks ago to attend the birthday party of one of her best friends at a nice hotel outside of town. A lot of our friends would be there, and we knew it had to be a great evening. Julia asked me if I still intended to go there, and again got a strange look on her face when I said I did and suggested she take a cab to get there. She asked, "So you want me to pay for half the cab?" "Of course you forgot we're no longer a couple. Don't blame me. Please remember who ruined our relationship." She wanted to leave and accepted my offer. The party went well, with dancing to live music. Julia was her usual beautiful self again and having a good time. She hardly noticed that I had been avoiding her throughout the evening. I danced a few tunes with Jennifer, who was very surprised when I told her that Julia had dumped me in favor of a married politician she met in a PR course. I wasn't surprised when Jennifer told me, "I've always envied her for being lucky enough to find a man like you." When Jennifer and I left the party and I told Julia she had to get home on her own, she started sobbing and told me, "You can't do this to me?" Of course I can. Jennifer and I went to her apartment where we started undressing each other as soon as we were outside the door. As we undressed, she started kissing me all over my body. Before we left, I told Jennifer that she was a beautiful girl and I would love to see her again, but my life was in such a mess that I couldn't think about any relationship yet. She understood. When I got home, I found Julia in the kitchen and she was furious. There was no doubt that she had been crying. She asked me, "How could you do that?" "Not hard at all. Jennifer told me she was always jealous of you having me, and why wouldn't she take her chance when she had the opportunity? No one was fooling anyone." She was my best friend and she humiliated me of all people. Please remember that we are free people in a free country, and there is no reason not to do what we want. She wanted me now that I am free. Please remember that the only cheater in this case is you. You slept with that creep Ben behind my back. I've never cheated on you since we met. You ruined the friendship between me and my best friend. And you derailed my planned wedding to the girl I was in love with. A neighbor's wife with a child the same age as our son called and asked Julia if she wanted to go with her to the equestrian club where they were having a pony ride for the kids that Sunday. Julia agreed and left the house. 10 minutes after she left, the doorbell rang, and when I opened it, a well-dressed man, several years older than me, stood before me. He asked me, "Are you Lars Eriksson?" Even knowing the answer, I replied, "And who are you?" "My name is Benjamin Hassel." Then I sprang into action and kicked him in the balls with my knee so hard that he almost fell forward. I grabbed his right arm and dragged him outside where I kicked him in the ass and said, "You fucking pervert, have you already forgotten what I promised to do if I found your ass on my property? Back off before I get mad." He ran to his car, locked the doors, but didn't leave. I went back inside, found Benjamin Hassel's name in the county phone book, and called the number. A woman's voice answered, "Magdalena Hassel." "My name is Lars Eriksson. I am the spouse of Julia Meyer, who last week took the same PR course as your husband Benjamin. Do you know where he is now?" "Of course I do. He's visiting his old mother. Why do you ask?" "Because Julia confided in me that on the course she and Benjamin shared the same bed and slept together every night. Now he sits outside my house in a red BMW and refuses to leave until poor Julia comes out to see him, and she refuses to do so. The neighbors are starting to ask what's going on. If he doesn't leave within 3 minutes, I'm going to call the evening tabloids and tell them about the cheating and sexual adventures on their political courses. I'll take care of it. Please don't call the papers. I promise he will never harass her again." I went outside again, and within a minute I saw him talking on his cell phone before walking away with a huff into the street. I greeted his departure with a finger. When Julia returned, I told her that her man in her life was asking about her. She became agitated and shouted, "Did you hurt him?" "No. A wimp like me shouldn't do anything like that. I kindly told him to leave my property, which he did without any objection." The poor fellow was evidently quite lost, for he was looking for the nursing home where his old mother lives. If you don't believe me, you can ask his wife Magdalena, because she was the one who told me about him visiting his old mother. I thought I detected a glimmer of a smile on her face as she replied, "Weak? You're rude, mean, and nasty, but no one can call you a wimp." Thank you, Lord, for Julia's awakening. She accepted my invitation to join me during a coffee break. We talked about our son, and to my great pleasure, we did so in a polite manner, without arguing or yelling. We decided not to involve any authority in the custody matter as long as Julia was living in my home. She even begged me not to bring Jennifer or any other girl into the house so as not to humiliate her. I agreed, and she, willingly, promised to take care of my laundry. Not much happened the following week. I spent Wednesday evening with Jennifer at her apartment, had a delicious meal and great sex. I was really starting to like Jennifer, and I couldn't understand why her relationship didn't last longer than it did. On Friday, Julia called me at work and invited me to dinner that evening. She even asked if she could have dinner in the cafeteria. I agreed, and she cooked a delicious dinner, bought my favorite wine, and set up a romantic setting with candles and such. We made pleasant small talk, and she agreed to go shopping with me at the supermarket on Saturday morning. Then she asked me, "Do you hate me for betraying your trust?" "No, I don't hate you. I feel sorry for you because even you were victimized in this story." "I'm sorry for doing that to you. It's none of my business and you don't need to say anything, but how are things with you and Ben?" "Nothing at all. I haven't spoken to him since I got off the train a week ago, and now I really regret meeting him at all. Please believe me when I say that he is no longer the man in my life. I can't understand how I could have let him do what he did. He turned my life into a complete mess." "What about Jennifer and you? Do you love her? Is she going to move in here when you kick me out?" "Jennifer is a nice girl, and I told her I really like her, but my life is in such a mess that I can't think about any new relationships yet. I don't want to kick you out, and Jennifer never asked to take your place here. After all, she's your best friend. My friends aren't using you. Please remember, I'm just a dumped ex right now." "You're the one who dumped me. I had no intention of dumping you. But I will admit that it was my own fault that you dumped me. Cheating with Ben was the worst mistake of my life. Do I have any chance of getting you back in the future?" "Yes." "When? How long do I have to wait for that chance?" "Accept my terms and we can start right now." She smiled happily upon hearing my yes. I had been expecting this question and had already thought out my two conditions, which I informed her of. I wanted her to set aside all politics and let go of all her previous restrictions on our sex life. I realized that a week was a small amount of time to keep her out in the cold before getting her back after what she had done. But it's always better to put shit like that behind you as soon as possible, and it's better to look forward and work for the future than to look back and dwell on old shit. She's a good mom, and we have a son to take care of. She accepted my suggestions without objection and comments about staying out of politics. Julia smiled happily when I mentioned that improved sex wasn't a problem. She loved me more than ever and wanted to do everything she could to get it anyway. Julia breathed a sigh of relief when she realized that those two conditions were all I needed. I told her that I didn't demand to know any details of what Ben and her had been up to, and even promised to forgive all her cheating if she admitted to it now. She swore that the only thing she'd done before was to have a little fling with a guy 3 years ago. We talked for a long time about what we were looking forward to in the future, and it was late that night when we fell asleep in my bed without any sex. First thing Saturday morning, we started our new improved sex life with some gentle lovemaking as a soft start. Afterward, she called her local political boss and skimmed through everything she was interested in about local politics. Reading the local morning paper, I discovered a very nice news story from the county capital. It began, "Hassel gets out of politics. One of our county's leading politicians, Mr. Benjamin Hassel, has resigned from his party and all his political activities." I called a babysitter for our son and made reservations for 2 at a romantic hotel for the evening. I never once regretted taking her back.